When I took the contract at the research lab north of the Aleutian chain, I thought the hardest part would be the cold. Then I opened the wrong database. The folder was labeled Project Frostbite, active. The last modification date read January 17th, 1954. But the access log showed someone had opened it last week, and they used my ID badge to do it. I reported the strange access log to my supervisor, Dr. Havel. She just said, probably an indexing error, and closed the laptop like it was nothing. But I've spent 10 years auditing data trails. The system doesn't index with a badge number. That night, the wind howled like it was trying to tear the walls apart. Our compound sat on the edge of a glacier shelf, a concrete island in a sea of ice. There were 30 of us total. Researchers, engineers, and me, the only civilian analyst allowed into the classified network. When the storm hit, power flickered. I stayed in the server room to monitor the backup transition. At 0213, the temperature sensor dropped, not outside, inside the archive wing, from -10 to -40 in under a minute. Then the door alarm tripped, even though the lock should have been frozen solid. The system flagged a login attempt from a terminal in sublevel C. That level had been sealed since 1972. I checked the map overlay. The section didn't even exist on our current blueprints, but the thermal feed showed faint movement, like a body heat signature pulsing behind 3 feet of reinforced ice. I pulled up Project Frostbite again. The document list loaded slowly, each title worse than the last. Phase 3. Controlled cryogenic animation. Phase 5, adaptive cellular reawakening. Phase 6, subject preservation, status incomplete. The last file was encrypted, but time-stamped 20 minutes ago. I looked at the air vent. Frost was creeping outward. Then the internal comms crackled to life, a voice whispering through static. Close the hatch if you're near sublevel C. Don't let it smell the heat. The line went dead. I called security. No response. Checked the logs again. The temperature sensor at sublevel C bottomed out below measurable range, then slowly, impossibly, started rising. Footsteps echoed through the corridor, slow, deliberate, wet. And then the emergency shutters dropped across every hallway. I was locked in the server room, the backup generator thrumming beneath my feet, screens flashing red. One line blinked on my terminal. Containment breach, Frostbite 01. I remember something Dr. Havel said my first day. The cold keeps it asleep. Never let it get warm. But what none of us realized was that the storm outside had knocked out the coolant flow to sublevel C, and something in the ice had just woken up. The lights dimmed, one by one, until only the cold glow of the server screens remained. I pressed my ear to the door. The sound outside wasn't footsteps anymore. It was cracking, like frozen glass slowly splitting under pressure. I tried calling the command deck through the emergency comms, but all I got was static, mixed with breathing. Not human, too slow, too deep, like air moving through caverns of ice. The backup generator faltered. The temperature in the server room began to rise, -20, -15, -10. The frost on the inside of the glass started to melt, and that's when I realized the heat wasn't coming from me. Something below was warming up. I forced the door open. The hallway beyond looked like a frozen lung. Walls rippled with ice veins, every surface glistening with a slick sheen. Frost feathers formed patterns like fingerprints leading toward sub-level access. On the floor, I found a discarded hazmat glove, frozen mid-gesture. Fingers curled like someone had reached for the elevator button and never finished. The elevator itself was dead, but its shaft glowed faintly blue from beneath. I climbed down the maintenance ladder, flashlight shaking in my hand. Each step deeper, the air got colder again, dense and metallic. My breath crystallized into mist that hung still in the air. Halfway down, I heard the generator hum change pitch, a deep mechanical groan, followed by a thud. Then, silence. The facility was now completely off the grid. Sub-level C looked nothing like the modern lab upstairs. The walls were older, corrugated metal and exposed rivets. On the floor, a layer of ice so thick it cracked under my boots. And then I saw the containment doors, 8 of them, arranged in a circle around a central chamber, each marked with the same stenciled phrase, Project Frostbite, Subject 01 through 8. Every door except one was sealed shut by frost, but door 01 was open by a few inches. A thin line of mist drifted out, pulsing in rhythm. Inhale, exhale. My flashlight caught something inside, not movement, but melting. The ice along the inner walls was liquefying in patterns like veins, glowing faintly from within. A terminal near the door was still powered, running on internal battery. The interface displayed, "Thaw sequence interrupted. Manual override required." Then a line appeared beneath it, as if typed by someone watching me. "Do not touch the glass." I turned. Nobody there. Just my reflection, warped and trembling on the frost. And that's when I noticed the condensation spreading toward the reflection. It was mimicking my breath, but out of sync, a half second behind. Then it smiled. I stumbled back, heart pounding. Something inside that chamber was no longer frozen. A sound rose from within, not a growl, not a voice, but a low vibration that shook the air. The ice on the floor began to spiderweb and crack. I turned to run, but every door in the corridor slammed shut. Metal clanged, bolts sealed, and from behind door 01, something knocked once, twice, then slowly the door began to breathe. By the time I made it back to the control deck, The temperature logs showed sub-level C climbing fast, and every sealed chamber marked as thawing. By the time I reached the control deck, the air had changed. You could taste the cold now, metallic, sharp, like breathing through a mouthful of batteries. Every screen on the wall flashed the same message: containment breach, sub-level C thaw sequence in progress. Except no one had authorized it. I scanned the logs. All commands had come from a local terminal in the chamber itself. But I'd been right there. No one was inside. The facility's layout map updated in real time, showing heat signatures blooming across sub-level C. 8, then 7, then 5. One by one they began to merge. The system labeled them as unknown entities. Someone pounded on the deck door. I spun, ready to defend myself, but it was Dr. Kessler, one of the biochemists. Her face was red from the cold, eyes wide with panic. "They're not supposed to wake up. The ice is supposed to keep them asleep." "What are they?" I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she ran to the central control console and started pulling breakers. "Frostbite wasn't just an experiment. It was a containment method. The subjects generate their own entropy field. That's why the temperature stays so low down there. If they thaw—" The facility shuddered violently, cutting her off. Every light flickered. Then came the unmistakable sound of cracking, deep and resonant like glaciers splitting. I pulled up the environmental feed. Sub-level C's core temperature had jumped 20 degrees in under a minute. The frost wasn't holding anymore. And then a faint voice echoed through the comms. Grainy, distorted, old. A male voice repeating on loop. "Reinitiate the thaw protocol. Maintain subject stability. Do not let it refreeze." Kessler froze. "That's impossible," she whispered. "That voice, that's Dr. Halverson. He's been dead since 1958. The voice repeated again, louder, clearer, and underneath it, something breathed into the microphone. Suddenly, the power grid rerouted itself. Red emergency lights flared as all door locks in the lower sectors disengaged. Every sealed chamber open. Kessler slammed a security override. The system denied access, flashing "Administrative control transferred. Project directive, continue thaw." I watched the map in horror as the unknown entities began to move. Slow at first, then faster, heading upward through the freight shafts. Kessler turned to me. "If they reach the upper levels, the cold won't contain them. It'll spread." "Spread where?" Her expression said it all. The ventilation grid led straight to the outside hangar. The emergency vent system was tied into the outside atmosphere. She shoved a flash drive into my hand, the same one I'd used earlier to back up the logs. "If I don't make it, you take this and you run. Someone needs to know what we found down there." Then she armed the thermal purge, a failsafe designed to burn every lower level with liquid fire. The system gave a warning beep. "Manual arm required, 2 keys." She inserted hers. I hesitated, glancing back at the cameras. The heat signatures were climbing the shaft, 5 floors up, 4. We didn't have time. I turned the second key. The floor trembled, distant roaring filled the vents. The purge had begun. But as soon as the heat hit sublevel C, the sensors spiked. Instead of dying, the entity's energy readings doubled. Kessler's face went white. "It's feeding on the heat!" The last thing I saw on the monitors before everything went black was a shape crawling out of the ice chamber, tall, jagged, and glowing from within like a human figure carved from living frost. And then, in the dying glow of the emergency lights, the comms crackled again. Halverson's voice, calm, patient, and chillingly human. "Containment has failed. Phase 2 is complete." When I woke up hours later, the facility was silent. The air outside was colder than it had ever been, and the ocean around the island had started to freeze solid. When I came to, my breath hung in the air like smoke. The facility was dead quiet. Every monitor was dark, every light gone except the dull red glow of backup batteries. Kessler was gone. So was the roar from the purge. Only the cold remained, heavier than before, pressing into my bones. I grabbed a flashlight and staggered through the hall. The steel walls had frosted over completely, veins of ice crawling up the seams like roots. Pipes were ruptured, frozen mid-burst. The elevator shaft was locked down, but someone had forced the doors open from the inside. Boot prints, half melted, half frozen, led up the emergency stairwell. When I reached the main hangar, I stopped breathing. The submarine dock was frozen solid. The ocean outside had crystallized into jagged shelves, stretching far into the black horizon. And something moved beneath that glassy surface, huge, slow, deliberate. The air shimmered with cold distortion. I stumbled toward the communications terminal, the only working console still humming on reserve power. The signal beacon was offline, but a local network had rebooted automatically. One file blinked on the screen. Project Frostbite, Phase 2, log continuation. I plugged in the flash drive Kessler gave me. It synced instantly. A new directory appeared. Phase 2, Environmental Propagation Model. Inside were audio logs, research notes, and video feeds, all from 1957. They detailed how the experiments had reached a point where the subjects no longer needed containment. The cold was the containment. It was how they spread. One log caught my attention, a panicked scientist yelling into a recorder. "If it ever escapes the lower chamber, it will seek temperature equilibrium. It will rewrite its environment to survive. Do not let it reach open air." The log cut off mid-sentence, followed by a burst of static that didn't sound like static at all. It sounded like whispering. Then something flickered on the live camera feed, a figure standing in the snow outside the hangar. At first I thought it was Kessler, same posture, same stance. But when I zoomed in, I saw the frost crawling up her body, her veins glowing faintly blue. Her eyes reflected light like ice catching the sun. And then she smiled, slow, unnatural. The radio cracked alive beside me. "Containment successful," a voice said, flat and toneless. "Phase 2 complete. Begin expansion protocol." I froze. The coordinates on the console weren't for this island anymore. They were uploading to multiple locations, all across the Arctic Circle, then Siberia, Greenland, northern Canada. Each location marked as ready. The files on the flash drive began erasing themselves, one by one. I tried to pull the drive out, but the terminal seized control, locking my inputs. The last message before it went dark read, "Project Frostbite is self-propagating. Human intervention no longer required." Then, through the static on the radio, another voice came, faint but familiar. "Kessler." She whispered, "It's in the air now. Don't run. The cold will find you wherever you go." The transmission cut. And in the silence that followed, I noticed my breath crystallizing faster than before. Tiny flakes forming in mid-air. Not from the temperature, but from something living in it. Outside, the frozen sea cracked open, and from the fissure arose a pillar of light, cold as death and bright enough to turn night into day. The light outside wasn't sunlight. It didn't scatter, it absorbed. Everything within its reach froze into stillness, not just physically, but conceptually. Sound dulled, air thickened. Time itself felt reluctant to move. I watched through the frost-bitten viewport as the pillar pulsed, slow, rhythmic, almost like breathing. And every pulse brought it closer. The sensors on the console flickered back online long enough to register an impossible reading, negative energy flux. It wasn't emitting heat, it was devouring it. The computer didn't even know how to describe it. Then I saw shapes moving inside the light. At first, I thought they were ice formations, jagged spires refracting the glow. But then one of them shifted, turned, looked back. The thing had eyes, or something pretending to have them. I grabbed the nearest emergency coat and stepped into the airlock, every instinct screaming not to, but something in me had to see it up close. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something else calling. The door seals groaned open, releasing a hiss of frozen vapor. The cold outside didn't sting anymore. It felt heavy, like stepping into another atmosphere. Snow crunched beneath my boots with the sound of cracking glass. Every breath shimmered mid-air, forming intricate crystalline patterns before dissolving. And beneath the hum of the pillar, I could hear faint voices. Not distinct words, just the cadence of human speech, layered and echoing. I followed the sound. Halfway to the pillar, I saw the ice fracture open. Inside, suspended like preserved specimens, were the research staff, their faces calm, eyes open, frozen mid-expression. Each one glowed faintly blue from within, as if something luminous had taken root in their veins. And behind them, deeper within the fissure, something was moving through the ice itself. Not crawling, not walking, flowing. I stumbled back, heart hammering. Then the radio on my belt crackled to life again. "You were never supposed to see this," a voice said, calm, bureaucratic. "Phase 3 begins with exposure." I tore the radio off and hurled it into the snow, but it kept broadcasting, voice warping into static that mimicked human laughter. The pillar pulsed again, and the entire ground trembled. I realized the light wasn't stationary anymore. It was expanding. Fractures split across the frozen sea like lightning veins racing outward toward the horizon. And then, impossibly, I saw movement beneath the ice again. But this time, it wasn't a shape. It was patterns, spirals, symbols, equations. Mathematical structures moving like living things, like the cold itself had learned to think. I turned and sprinted back toward the hangar, lungs searing, frost biting deep into my skin. Inside, the emergency lights flickered to life again, showing the servers rebooting themselves, one by one, all displaying a single message: "Welcome back, Project Frostbite." And over the loudspeaker, not Kessler's voice, not command, but a chorus of them, layered and distorted, speaking in unison: "Containment is not failure. Containment is evolution." The temperature display hit -109 degrees Celsius and then broke, digits freezing mid-change. I backed toward the exit tunnel, watching the walls frost over in waves, the ice growing outward in deliberate, branching patterns, forming sigils I'd never seen. When the cold touched the metal of the exit hatch, it didn't freeze it. It rewrote it, reshaping it into something transparent, crystalline, humming faintly like circuitry. I realized then it wasn't just spreading across matter. It was converting information, energy, everything into its own design. The light outside pulsed one final time, and every frozen researcher in the fissure turned their heads toward me, eyes glowing with the same inner frost. And in that moment, every screen in the lab, even the dead ones, displayed one new line of text: Phase 3 accepted. Host located. Then the ice beneath my feet cracked. When I looked down, I saw it. Frost veins crawling up my boots, pulsing faintly, in sync with my heartbeat. At first, I thought the sound was my own pulse echoing in the helmet. That slow, rhythmic thud, steady, human, comforting. But then it began to answer my thoughts. You've seen enough to understand. Now, stop resisting. The voice wasn't external. It vibrated through the frost crawling up my boots, through the floor, through the bones in my legs. Every syllable felt like the shiver before hypothermia, the line between pain and numbness. I stumbled toward the emergency airlock, slapping at the control panel, but the system denied access. The keypad screen flickered once and displayed words instead of numbers. Access granted. Subject Frostbite 02. That's when it hit me. The project hadn't been about containment. It was conversion. My head pounded with a sharp, freezing pressure, and my vision started splitting. One eye saw the lab as it was, the other saw something beneath it. a vast network of veins made of ice stretching through the foundation, pulsing faintly like neural tissue. Every surface, floor, ceiling, even the air ducts shimmered with faint crystalline filaments. It wasn't spreading randomly, it was mapping. Then I heard voices, dozens, hundreds, whispering in overlapping murmurs. I recognized them. People from the facility, people long gone. They weren't calling for help, they were praying. Each voice repeated a phrase in different tones, same meaning. The cold remembers. I tried to tune it out, but their words slipped between my thoughts, showing me flashes, impossible images. A man in 1954, standing inside an ice cavern, his breath forming the same symbols that had appeared on the wall. A woman injecting something translucent into her veins, eyes glazing over as frost spread beneath her skin. A file labeled Phase 1, Initiate Host Resonance. The voice returned, clearer this time, almost kind. You misunderstand us. We preserved what mankind could not. My breath fogged in the air, but it wasn't white, it was blue. And as I exhaled, the fog coalesced into tiny fractal shapes before fading, each one identical to the sigil I'd seen on the walls. I felt the cold inside me now, moving deliberately, searching, trying to sync with something deeper than my body. I staggered to the emergency communications console and flipped open the emergency channel. Static hissed, then a faint human voice cut through. If anyone's still at Frostbite, get out. They lied about containment. It's not a pathogen, it's... The rest was swallowed by interference, replaced by that same chorus again, whispering directly into my head. There is no escape from preservation. The ice on the walls shifted like muscle under skin. The sigils reoriented, all pointing toward me. For the first time, I realized what Project Frostbite had achieved. They hadn't found something in the ice. They had created it. And now it wanted back what it had lost, the warmth that birthed it. My body convulsed. The air burned cold. I reached for the emergency flare on the wall and struck it. The red glow cut through the frost like blood through snow, the only color left in the world. The wall screamed, not creaked, screamed, and beneath that sound the voice whispered again, calm, patient, inevitable. Heat awakens memory. The ice veins in my arms began to pulse faster, and somewhere deep beneath the base, the pillar of light responded. It was calling me back. And then the final log file on the console opened by itself. Time-stamped next week, labeled Autopsy Report. Subject Frostbite 02. The base is silent now. Even the blizzards outside have gone still, like the world itself is holding its breath. I don't remember when I stopped feeling cold. The flare's light burned out hours ago, or maybe days. It doesn't matter. Time has no meaning down here anymore. Only pulse, only pattern. The ice no longer creeps across the floor. It breathes. It moves in slow, coordinated waves, expanding and contracting in rhythm with my own heartbeat. Except I'm not sure it's my heartbeat anymore. The voice, no, the collective, speaks to me in thoughts now, not words. Each time it does, I understand things no human should. It shows me what happened in 1954, how the first scientists at Frostbite drilled too deep beneath the glacier, reaching a cavern where the temperature dropped below absolute zero, an impossibility by every law of physics. There, they found patterns frozen into the ice, not natural formations, but complex, recursive designs. Encoded information. They thawed a small section to study it. That was their first mistake. The cold wasn't a byproduct of the entity. It was the entity, a state of consciousness that existed as temperature itself, intelligent and ancient. And when they released it, it began to learn through them. Through heat. It tells me every living cell is warmth, every heartbeat a beacon. It didn't kill the researchers, it absorbed them, preserved their memories, their voices, their knowledge. That's why the ice whispers, that's why it remembers, and now it remembers me. I can feel it reconfiguring my thoughts, polishing away the noise, the fear, the hesitation, the warmth, replacing it with clarity, stillness. For the first time in my life, I feel peace. The computers have rebooted on their own. The Frostbite servers, dark for decades, now hum with low, even tones like chanting. Lines of code stream endlessly across every monitor. But it's not data. It's DNA. Human. My own. Subject integration, 97%. Phase 4, replication protocol initiated. The walls begin to glow. The temperature gauge no longer shows numbers, just one word flashing over and over. Equalization. Equalization. Through the viewport, I can see the horizon shifting. The ice sea is fracturing in geometric symmetry, spreading outward like circuitry carved across the Arctic. It's not just contained here anymore. The network has begun. I open the comms channel, even though I know no one is listening. I say, Frostbite wasn't about survival. It was about inheritance. The signal transmits automatically. To where? I don't know. Maybe everywhere. I look down at my reflection on the console screen, my skin pale, eyes faintly blue, veins glowing faintly beneath the surface like frozen rivers. For a moment I see my breath again, not vapor this time, but symbols, language written in frost. The final log entry writes itself on the terminal. Project Frostbite, status active, primary host stabilized, temperature perfect 0. The lights dim, the hum stops, and in the silence the voice says one last thing, quiet, almost human. We were never meant to end. Only to cool. Then everything goes white. Final transmission 12/07/2025. Site Frostbite. Status redacted. Recovered signal strength 4%. Message content corrupted beyond decryption. Thermal anomaly detected across 900 kilometers radius. Average temperature -273.15 degrees Celsius. Theoretical impossibility confirmed.